Education Neighborhood Committee, and we will call it to order. We have a full number of council members, and we only have one item on the agenda, and we're very pleased that the superintendent was able to adjust the schedule and come and visit with us. Before we bring the superintendent, we have one general public comment. Let me get that out of the way, and then we can get into our one agenda item. Mr. Paul, is it Dorigo? Dorigo, yeah. Dorigo?
Should I read the item?
And for those that are familiar, general public comments are comments that individuals like to make about subjects that are under the jurisdiction of this committee that may not be on the agenda. And also, can we have Lydia Grant come on at this time? Have a seat. Ms. Grant.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Dorigo, and I'm here today to talk about the Reserve Animal Control Officer Program.
Which program?
Reserve Animal Control Officer Program for LA Animal Services. I had raised about $27,500 going to neighborhood councils over about a 2-year period to invigorate a program that had been dormant for quite a few years. And currently the general manager had not done anything with that money. It's sitting in an account. So I'm asking this council to please look at the information I'm providing. I have the receipts. I have the neighborhood councils I've been to. I have the documentation showing the program is valid. It's been around since 1985. It's a service that we need. It's volunteers to help animal issues out in all of LA. If you call LA Animal Services to try to get somebody to help with a stray, nobody shows up. They can't do it. So this is helping our neighborhoods do that. 23 neighborhood councils voted for it, and I stopped because the general manager now won't support the program. So I'm asking if we could please look into the funds. Either we need to get these funds back or we need to use them for what we asked for the funds.
Have you taken this before the Personnel and Animal Services Committee?
Yes, there's a motion that was done about a year ago that asked her to come back and perform, and she hasn't done it. She's told the Paul's Committee she doesn't want to do the program, and I can't get that motion heard, which is supposed to be her telling us how she's going to do the program. I have a copy of the motion here for you as well.
If you're going to leave that with us?
Yeah, I have 7 copies for you folks.
Can you repeat the name of the program again?
RACO, Reserve Animal Control Officer Program.
And who was the author of the motion?
Paul Kretz and the Paul's Committee. Yeah, this was under, at that time, Kathy Davis and I were working at it. She was the acting general manager.
But have you talked with him because he's the chair of that committee?
Oh, yeah, many. This is a lengthy conversation. This is not something, this is about 2 years now. Yeah, I promise you it'll be much detailed.
Thank you.
See where it's at.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Grant?
Yes, I'm here right now not as the commissioner of the neighborhood council system, but on some level I am, because you ask us to be accountable for the monies that our neighborhood councils spend, and when this issue was brought to my attention, I wanted to follow up on it. There is about...
That's the issue that he just spoke of?
Yes, this is also about the RACO program, and he's going to hand out the documents. Just to let you know, we had already met with the mayor's office and let them know also, but it has to go before the different committees, and the reason I brought it here was to make sure that we can help follow up with the funding. The money collected from the neighborhood councils was collected from about 25 different ones. $27,000 has been sitting in this account for almost 2 years now, and it's not accountable. The department's numbers don't match the numbers of the invoices we have, and that's one reason that Mr. Drigo had stopped collecting the funds, was because he wasn't getting copies of the invoices and there was no accountability. So I'm following up with you to make sure that this neighborhood council money is protected and that it goes to its intended purpose. And the one other thing I wanted to add was I myself wrote the motion on my neighborhood council to donate to this program. We donated about $1,000 to the program, and we did write a letter as a neighborhood council to the Department of Animal Services to follow up on why the funds hadn't been spent. And basically, we were given a letter, but the basic response has been that there just wasn't any volunteers to do that. And you know, with the Reserve Officer Police Program, there are people out there, especially in this economic climate, where people could use this on their resume to help them get a job. So we want to make sure this money, which could have 2 purposes, plus bringing in the money for all the license fees that aren't being done, because these are the people that are supposed to be collecting it. So we ask that the neighborhood council money is overseen and make sure it goes to its correct intent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Those are our 2 public comments. Superintendent, if we can get you up at the table here and just to give you kind of an overview of In this committee, we oversee both education and neighborhoods, but the way things have happened over the last several years is that almost all of our attention has been dealing with neighborhoods, neighborhood councils, and we rarely have ever had a education subject, and certainly I don't recall the superintendent come and visit us. And so we wanted to set this forum to where you had an opportunity to discuss with us the state of schools in the city of Los Angeles, and what we're hopeful also, because we want to take this committee hearing and have it at full council at a later date, is to have hopefully a document that we can share with the entire council that can break out their schools and give a state of the schools per council district.
Okay.
And that way, they would have a personal interest in looking at their schools, where they are, and have questions that might help them get a better understanding. And so we thought we'd start it off, and we could see if there's opening comments by either of the other council members, but we thought you'd give us kind of an overview. And so let me ask Mitch if he had something to add.
Okay.
I'll just for the overview. Thank you.
Item number 1,
Great to see old friends.
Sorry, we didn't give you your, would you now tell us what item we're on?
yeah. Item number 1, Motion Parks Martinez, and presentation by the Superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District on the state of LASD schools by region and by council district, and a subsequent presentation to the council in January 2014.
And we're going to have to alter that because we had to cancel that December meeting. So that date to council is going to be in February sometime.
Okay.
Great.
Now we're official.
Great.
Superintendent.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. As soon as you called, I absolutely wanted to take up the invitation and share with you this. So a bit of a trial run. So we'll work on, as I'm hearing this point, you would enjoy reading this data by the council-managed districts, and our two entities can work on that. Obviously, we're kind of focused on void districts, but we'll get that piece in the next iteration, but I think you'll provide this helpful. And I spent some time over the weekend talking to some of my allies and friends across the country, and I was saying I was going to come here, and they were saying, oh, well, what do you make of that? I said, it couldn't be better. I have never worked in a place where there was such a uniformly good working relationship between the leadership of the city and the district.
Could you bring that mic a little closer, because they're taping that.
Especially on the compliment part, absolutely. So what I wanted to just start off with is take a moment and share why at some level this is a uniquely great working relationship. Not all of these things represent the totality of it, but needless to say, I would say that we enjoy a remarkably positive working relationship with the council and the mayor's office and the various council district staff, and we're very appreciative of that. We have nothing less than the single best working relationship I've ever seen in my life with the LAPD and LAUSD, and that is a remarkably effective and good working relationship. We have huge synergy in after-school programs, joint use agreements that work with us, the youth source centers, and facility work. Just to name a few, those are apart but help all support education. And so I actually don't have any of those traditional things where I'd like to say, but we could do X. It actually is in very, very good shape. We'll look to improve on those items. So wanted to make those comments from the beginning. So I'll walk you through this overview, and I'll do this kind of heads down and quickly until you tell me to stop and you want more information on a piece. But this is designed to provide you a snapshot of the place that I have the privilege of being the superintendent of, which is the second largest district in the United States. We enroll students from preschool to adult education, and our total number of students who come to us every single day is 907,019 students. And we've broken them down for you here in our K-5 schools, 271,000, our middle schools, 113,000, our senior high schools, which are 9 through 12, 139,000. Obviously, I'm rounding in each of these cases. Independent charters, 95. Our special day programs, our programs for ungraded classrooms for students with very special needs, 28,000. We have opportunity and continuation schools for students who are in lots of struggle but remain with us, about 5,000. We have 256,000 students also in adult education. And if you take a look on the right-hand side, it basically indicates that, we work with families. We have 92 languages spoken other than English across LAUSD. The percentage of our students who represent the largest ethnic groups and racial groups that we work with, we are overwhelmingly a Latino district, so we have 73% of our youth identify themselves as Latino or Latina. 10% describe themselves as African American, Black African diaspora. A little over 8 white, about 4 are Asian, and about 2 are Filipino. And then you see the other items that are listed there. We translate every day into 8 languages whenever we produce a document inside of LAUSD. But 28% of our students are English learners. And a little over 75% or 3/4 of our youth live in circumstances of poverty. We're responsible for a little over 1,300 schools in LAUSD. We have primary centers, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, options, magnets, special education programs, and we've listed them all out for you. 249 charter schools, and approximately 800 pre-K through 12, 37 adult schools, ROP, and skill centers, and we have 85 early education centers. We cover 710 square miles, and then some of the data we like to say is we serve more people food west of the Mississippi than any institution. We serve 2, in most cases 3 meals a day to most of our youth. We have, I think, the second largest, other than the government, roofed area that we maintain in all of these schools. And we do that with 60,000 employees, about 33,600 certificated employees, and 26,500 rounded off classified employees to serve all of this. I'll make some comments on the trends on that in a moment. And I think you're very clear about what we're clear about. We're not in LA confused about our mission whatsoever. We lift youth out of poverty, and that's the reason we all come to work every single day. And we're not going to be satisfied until we have 100% of youth who can graduate college and workforce ready. We're proud of the progress we're making there, and unsatisfied until we reach that point. It'd be impossible for me to continue the presentation and talk about this data with you if we didn't make comment on the economic climate here in California. And while certainly, and I would say, thank God, things have turned around, we've been through 6 probably the worst years in the history of California for public education. So we've had to cut $2.9 billion out of the general fund in the past 4 years. And those have been nearly entirely people. That's the programs that we've had to cut way back on. So we used to have a great deal more staff who was able to work and support students. That has been severely curtailed. Second of all is that people, the amazing people who support and teach and lead and nurse and guide and counsel and clean and feed and all of the other items, our students have done so by watching year after year their actual salaries go down because we all took pay cuts so that we could keep some of these programs going. I know this is, you read this in the papers and you experience yourselves as you've tried to manage a gigantic city in these economic times. I'm not going to go through all of the pieces except to say nothing would have been possible without amazing staff. And the data that we look at just simply seems very counterintuitive that we make these gains even though we've had these terrible cuts. And the reason is people have really worked themselves to the bone around that. I suspect at some point we'll talk about the change in the law and the new funding formula today if you have questions about that as we move forward around that. But a bit of backdrop as we take a look at LA. When I came to the district, and I had the privilege of being the superintendent, we came at this work by saying that we were going to be very clear about the fact that fundamentally the goal is to lift youth out of poverty, and to do that we approach this with a three-part theory of action. The first part was to totally transform the human capital, which is by far and away the largest portion of any budget. I mean, it's well over 88% of our budget. So we set about really thinking very deeply about who gets the right and the privilege to be in the system and be in front of students. As you know, you make this, I would call it this kind of sacred trust, and that is a system takes money in the form of tax dollars off of people's kitchen tables and converts that into the opportunity to run the system, and the quid pro quo is that students graduate college and workforce ready. So we set about, the first part was thinking very carefully about how do we completely transform how we hire and fire and promote and place and train, retain all of the employees in the system. And we've been about that work very publicly, and we're very proud of the growth we've made in that. That's the whole work about who gets to work in the system and how you help them understand how to teach and how you work with students of all different needs, etc. The second thing was, how do you run a system that's a $7 billion annual budget? As you all know, you are running a very, very large systems yourself. You can't just hope that it gets good at the end of each year. You set very specific targets, and then we put in a system of performance management and hold everybody in the system accountable to delivering on what we've agreed matters. And so you can't do everything. But what you choose to do, we should be really focused on. So we developed a whole system inside of LAUSD that allowed us to be very, very focused on a few key issues, which kind of drives exactly how we operate every month and every month and every year. And so the performance meter, which I'll talk about in a moment, sets very aggressive, certainly, but who wouldn't be aggressive, targets for our system. And then we begin by helping people. We had a wholesale training on how you do a one-on-one with your direct reports, how your direct reports actually work with your division, and then once a month the entirety of the system comes together for a performance dialogue on one of these items. And then the third piece was high-quality public choice. Parents and students have the right, and we want to give them as much choice as possible to go to high-performing schools that they feel meet their need. So the board has a very robust portfolio. We have some 9 different styles of schools for people that they can attend. We have what we would call traditional public schools. We have public schools that are in magnets. We have thematic magnets. We have schools that are small schools that are teacher-designed, teacher-led, and teacher-opened. We have schools that are for highly effective and high-performing youth. We have schools that are also thematic. So we have schools for the arts, and we have schools that are involved in technology, and schools that are involved in science, technology, education, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. We run schools that are thematically arranged around language. So we have dual immersion schools in Mandarin, and we have them in Spanish, and et cetera, across the system. We have 2 types of schools where teachers at the schools either open the school or decide that they're going to have much greater autonomy from traditional collective bargaining language. Pilot schools and local initiative schools, all negotiated with our labor unions, where they basically decide which parts of the labor contract they want to have and which parts they don't want to have, and then they run the school that way. And we have affiliated charter schools, and we have independent charter schools. In that whole array, we provide zones of choice for students all over LAUSD, and then help them by providing them information about what is their choice. And then moved on all 3 of those things pretty aggressively. So what you have on page 5 is an example of the performance meter, which basically took baseline data, it's pretty obvious what it did, and set a series of targets. And these were the items that we put our greatest focus on for four-year cohort graduation rates, the percentage of students on track for meeting A through G, and then achievement rates in English language arts and in mathematics, and then specifically in third grade reading and in algebra, and reclassification rates. Reclassification rates would be the ability for students who are currently not an English learner who's proficient to becoming a proficient English speaker. Incredibly important since it's virtually impossible to graduate unless you get reclassified. Attendance rates for staff and for students, parent and community engagement rates, and school safety and suspension. So I'll walk us through some of the information across LA as we've watched the past couple of years. So our four-year cohort graduation rate is the rate at which if you start as a ninth grader and 4 years later you graduate. We have graduation, let me say it differently. We have many programs for students who don't finish in 4 years, who stay with us 5 years and sometimes 6 years. So the graduation rate for the district totally for students is higher, but we do track this one because it's important that we have a uniform measure across all the districts in California. This rate has steadily increased. We're very proud of this. As I said before, it is not at 100%, and when it's there, I will be satisfied and pleased. But needless to say, I'm actually quite pleased of the progress. From 09 to 10, we've gone from 55% to 66%. And when we add our students in who stay an extra year with us and students who stay 2 years with us, that number hovers around 80%. A through G, just as a reminder, is the California code for students who take a set of courses and get a C or better in those courses, and then the University of California says you are eligible for admission. So this is a threshold. It's a very high bar threshold, and our goal is that the A through G course requirement is for all students. And we have been making progress on this issue, but it's also an issue that's come into focus in the last 2 years. So once we, as a board, at that point decided that actually the A through G requirement would be for all students, I think you'll begin to see, like we're beginning to see, that curve move fairly dramatically. And then when we take a look at English language arts and some of the subject matters, this is a secondary and elementary. Again, moving from 44 to 51 and moving from 37 to 45 in the same year in terms of advanced and or proficient for students. These were all on a set of tests that we'll probably talk about in a little bit, which are no longer going to be given anymore. These were the California standards tests, which have now been sunset around the law that was just passed, so they won't be given this year. This is actually the last year in 12-13 that we will have seen the data. This becomes one data point which we measure a school's API. Mathematics also, if we take a look at the growth in mathematics, again, pleased. We have lots of room to continue to improve. We've watched our proficiency at elementary move from 57 to 63, and at elementary from secondary from 25 to 31. We pay particular attention to third grade ELA, and in third grade ELA, English Language Arts and Proficient. And we pay particular attention to proficient and advanced in algebra because they're both incredibly important subjects, both for triggering where we need to intervene in the student's life and also for triggering gatekeeping for courses. And that's why we pay very close attention to these. And again, the trend and movement has been that we have made advancement, and we continue to be proud of that, and we continue to be mindful of how much we have in front of us to continue to do. The slides on the next page deal with this issue of reclassification. So you need 3 levels of achievement to reclassify. You have to be able to make proficiency on what we call the AMAO1, which is your level of proficiency in English language arts on your standard and the state test. You have to pass the CELT, which is a state-given test, and your teacher in your classroom certifies a level of proficiency in your speaking piece. And so we track this one because if students don't pass this first threshold, they can't actually take the other items, and they will never get reclassified. The second thing, and our reclassification rate in general, we've been able to double that, and that's very good. It continues to be a piece that we need to be very mindful of. The next chart is the one you actually want to go down. All the others you want to go up, except for suspensions. This is the percentage of students who've not reclassified in 5 years. In other words, they've remained long-term learners, and we want students not to be remaining long-term learners. So if this is going down, that means they are getting reclassified. These students are still not reclassified, and so we pay attention to that, but this is a good direction to have this take place in. And we run a very robust special education program. And one measure we take a look at is our ability to have our students at least 80% of the day inside of what we call the general education program, which 2/3 is the number that, as you see, pretty constant here, which means they're receiving 1/3 of the day in special support. This is a long way from 1/3 to half, where students were predominantly not with their peers. This is a very positive piece, and it's one that we want to be able to continue. That's why we track that. Attendance. So the percentage of students with 96% or higher attendance, we track that. Obviously, you can't learn if you're not in school, but you also don't get your funding from the state if you're not in school. So it's an important piece. And we also track the percentage of staff with 96% or higher in attendance. Very proud to have ended last year with our highest attendance rate at that threshold than we've ever seen in LA. And we continue to take a look at how to provide incentives for staff at the same issues as well. And community and parent engagement. So pretty sharp increase on this piece. I came directly from a board focus on engagement in terms of parents reporting that they are informed about their child's progress. There's a whole technology piece to this. There is the electronic report card. There is the notification. We're very pleased about this because it tells us parents know what's happening inside of schools. And our participation on our survey remains much lower than I would like. But when it was first given, it was like 3% and 5%, so it has certainly moved up. We need to find as many ways as possible for parents to provide us information on just this one tool, although there are many other tools certainly that are there as well. Safety in school, percent of students who feel safe on school grounds, it's very high. It's remarkable. We're proud of it. I'll be very pleased the day that matches our graduation rate, and then I think we will have done quite a good job. A lot of work goes on that. Most students say unquestionably it's the safest place in their life, and we're proud of that. And I must say that just one vignette I would bring to your attention is right after the tragic massacre that took place in Newtown in Connecticut, when our school system was closed at that point, and when we reopened, the entirety of the LAPD and the LAUSD PD redid their schedules, and we had deployment across all of our schools. And it was one of the most notable pieces of collaboration that parents universally talked about. And another example of why we're very grateful for the relationship we have. Instructional days lost to suspension, this is exactly the chart you'd want to see. And it took us a long time, I think, in LA to get to this point. When I joined the system, we had lots of students being suspended. And we spent a great deal of time intensively looking at this. And we've moved, from 53,000 to 12,000 in terms of suspensions. And that has directly led to the very student bodies who were being disproportionately suspended is to end that disproportionality, and of course the achievement has gone up as well. AP, I think, is one of the things that usually everybody wants to hear about. AP, the advanced placement courses that are given by the College Board that students take classes in and then take an exam that everybody else in the whole country takes when they take the AP exam, and they post scores. And those scores in many universities have comparability for counting as a course. And so it provides students with a robust resume, but it also provides students with help financially. So if they've already been given credit for the course, they don't have to pay to take the course at the college. So high school enrollment has declined since 2006 and 2007. But more students took AP courses during the same time. That's a very difficult feat to try to make happen, and that actually is something we're very proud of. The number of students enrolled in AP has increased by nearly 5,000. The number of students taking AP courses by 7,000. The percentage of students enrolled in AP classes has increased by nearly 6 percentage points. And if you basically took, what does that data mean? It means 1 in 6 of our students in the entirety of LAUSD is now enrolled in an AP class. The number of AP exams written has increased by more than 12,000. Now, I would say that certainly some of that is it costs you a fee to take the exam, and a combination of the district and many of our parent groups have underwritten that fee for students in need, and that has really raised the ability for students to do that. I think it's quite positive. What we've provided you is the district enrollment. We've provided you with the AP enrollment. Those are students enrolled in AP courses. The percentages, we've moved from 12% to a little over 17, or actually 18% of students in 9 through 12 enrolled in courses. Total course enrollment, AP tests taken, and as you can see, that's been a very dramatic increase versus the decrease in population, and that's what I mentioned before. Very, very proud of that. The next items are more global, but they're also probably tracked the closest. So API growth is the state's measure. As you know, up until this year, API was the kind of single marker of a school. And they go from 200 to 1,000, and the state's threshold for good is 800 or above. And we've been very mindful of how we have been tracking the number of schools becoming 800s or 900s, how schools are coming out of the lowest API quartile, moving to the top API quartile. And growth points are measured across the entire state. So this is a state indicator. So you can take a look at growth across the district, and you I think can clearly point out LAUSD's growth points for 2012 and growth points for 2013. And it puts us in 2012 as the highest and the second highest in 2013. We don't have an API anymore. It too was sunsetted, so we'll look for a new way for the state to identify this. But this was a very, very important marker. This isn't the place to talk about other districts. But the year that just passed, the state saw a decline in API growth, and LAUSD saw an increase in API growth. In other years past, for example, the state, I'll just use them rather than talk about these other districts, saw a 10-point increase. LAUSD saw a 16, which means the state couldn't mathematically have seen an increase unless LAUSD had led the way we did. So it was such the largest contributor to these growth points for the state. It has a very important effect. I don't think I can describe enough how proud I am of this growth in the context of having lost so many resources. This isn't the place for my big political speech about how the state has disinvested in public education and has, invested in incarceration. I'll leave that for a different point. LAUSD continued to share sets of sacrifices across every employee so that I think we could deliver for kids. And I actually think we have done a good job with that. And now the last data points that I bring to you is a little bit unique because NAEP is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's an assessment given every 2 years. It's given in reading, which is a way to talk about English language arts, and it's given in mathematics. It's given in 2 grades, 4 and 8, and it's given across the entire country, and it has for years, sometimes called the National Report Card, sometimes the gold standard. It's probably a singular marker in this country of comparative quality, growth, and improvement. For a number of years now, and we get one of those every 2 years. Every state gets one, and it's always kind of a big deal. There's a lot of energy in reporting that. But for a number of years, LA has been part of a consortium of the large urbans in the country, which get an individual score for their district. No other district gets those unless you belong to this group and you participate. This is the Urban Data Trial Assessment, as it has been called. And we array the districts that participate in that in terms of the scores. So LA's never had scores like this in our history in this piece. So in 4th grade reading, we were 3rd in the country in terms of score improvement. In 8th grade reading, we were number 1 in terms of score improvement, tied with Atlanta. In mathematics, we were 3rd in the country in 4th grade in terms of improvement, and by far and away number 1 in 8th grade in terms of improvement. I think it's also worth getting a sense of the growth on those scores in terms of metrics of the other districts that are in there. By the way, you'll notice that there are other districts. If a district doesn't have or didn't take enough students for it, they're actually dropped out. So you only can compare those who actually took it in the same percentage as we do that. So the overwhelming majority, and I'll give you an example in 8th grade math, lost ground, as you can see. So much fewer gained than lost. And then you add that context to the growth for LA. The same would be said true about stagnant or no growth in 4th grade math. You can take a look at where LA did on that piece. The newspapers, and particularly the Times, LA Times has done a more extensive article on this and talks about subgroups as well, which are all available to take a look at. We had stunning performance for our youth who are African American, our youth who are Latino, as compared to all these districts as well. I'm incredibly proud of that. I could talk a lot. I'll boil it down to a couple of minutes. We have lots ahead of us. This is good. This is very good. This is something that I am incredibly proud of, and my team is, and our district is. It's not enough. And we still have a lot of growth to make around students who are not being successful. We've done a good job at keeping them at school, vastly better, and keeping them in. Now we have to continue to help them succeed. We have a number of huge challenges in front of us. They're good challenges, but they are groundbreaking. So the entire local control funding formula that has actually been passed by the state and the regulations, and how we're going to think about the distribution of those funds, and how we will begin to restore things that have been just completely wiped out. I know that we all live in our own worlds, and I don't pay enough attention to the cities running, and you probably don't pay enough attention to the schools, but I'll give you one data point. I'm sure you have them yourselves when we went through the Great Recession. But 4 or 5 years ago, the district was spending about $48 million a year in summer school programs. A kid who had failed a course gets to make up the course. A student who wants to take an extra course so they can get ahead. Students who want to take their first honors course get a bridge course. The last year, which was not last summer, but the summer before, 800,000. So from 48 million to 800,000 is an example of the kind of cuts we store. And that gives you one metric across what we went through in LA. We're definitely on the other side of that. And I'm grateful for everybody's support for that. We all know Prop 30 would not have passed in the state of California without LA. It was LA County that lifted it, and to all of us who helped with that, I'm indebted. That was the snapshot. And we can cut this any way you want and answer any question you'd like. And hopefully that was helpful as a starting point.
Very good, thank you. Ms. Martinez, would you like to start off the question?
Well, it's great to see old friends. Welcome to City Hall, Superintendent Dacey. I had a pleasure of working with you when I was on the school board, and I think we did a lot of really great work together. And as I transition to my new city responsibilities, I often talk to my own constituents and my neighbors, and we talk about how do we pick where we live, how do we find our communities, and a lot of the times for us, who are just starting off, my daughter will be 5 years old next month, we start shopping around for schools. And unless we give parents options, real options, meaningful options in our own communities, it is very difficult to build that quality of life that we all want in the city if we don't have the schools to send our children to. So this is one of the reasons why I applaud your effort, Mr. Chair, about bringing the superintendent before us and really getting a bigger a sense of how the state of our schools are doing in our prospective districts, because it does tell a story about where our families move into. So I am very, very eager to work with you on my new role. But I also want to hear from you in terms of, I know you've embarked on the, in reaching out to as many as our parents as we can on the local control funding formula, and explaining that to folks and getting people to really chime in terms of what they see the district's priorities being for their kids, because it's such an interesting and complicated formula. And it's very difficult to explain it to some folks. But I want to know how the city can partner with you so that we can do a better job of turning out folks from our prospective districts to participate in that, because that will dictate how the city spends its, the district spends its money for the next 3 years. So it's very important. The state just adopted the new regulations to sort of give you a sense of what they want to see, but it's due is it at the end of the school year?
Yeah.
So I think that's important for us to figure out how we can partner with the district and how to better explain this to our parents, because it's complicated.
So can I take a moment on that? So first of all, it is fantastic to see you as well, and you talked about those options, and I just happen to know obviously your area closest because we know each other, and you were instrumental in creating a number of those portfolio schools and turning around schools that had historically really struggled. So I thank you for being a partner with that as well. Maybe just 2 minutes at 50,000 foot level on what all has taken place in the state. So 2 major things happened. One was the state, through a referendum, a proposition, passed an increase in taxes for schools, which is a finite period of time. So after 8 years, that will sunset or renewed, but we have to only think about it for the finite period of time. And it produces, at least at the moment, where we can see the economy generally in front of us, an increased amount each year. The second thing is that the legislature, I have to only use the word radically, altered how schools will receive funding. I'm not going to do a whole funding thing, but you got pre-Prop 13, you have post-Prop 13, you have pre-98, you have this. And the best way to say what this is the local control funding formula, which is the law of the land about how money will come to schools now, does 2 things. It ends dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of special categorical funds. So money used to come to you like this amount, but you can only spend it on this amount only on this, et cetera, collapses them all together, and then, of course, adds new money on top of that, and then pretty much says the following, and I think we are, as a matter of fact, I know we are the only state in the United States that has ever moved from an equality-based funding formula to an equity-based funding formula without a lawsuit. And so equality is basically all kids get the same, no matter how, it might be a little bit or a lot, but you all get about the same, to this, which is your condition of need provides you with more resources. So what the formula produces is a set of dollars based on, of course, Prop 98 and the new money coming in on Prop 30, but then how that pie in Sacramento goes to districts looks something like this. And this is very simplistic, and this is what we're working on at the moment. Every student per child gets a base amount. So you have a base amount. Let's just make it very simple. So every student gets $10, and if you've got 100 students, you get $10 times 100, and that's your base amount per child. And this is where it gets very, very different. Every student who lives in a circumstance of poverty, as measured by those students who participate in the free and reduced lunch program, get a supplemental on top of that is designed to help students who live in circumstances of poverty. The second of three buckets on top of the base is that all students who live in foster care, and our census tells us who they are, you get an extra amount from the state for those, and it's to help those students. And then the third is all students who are English language learners, and that's a third bucket. And so you get your base for every student, and then for every student in one of those buckets, you get additional. And then the very unique thing is on top of that, the concentration of those students in a district will produce even more money on top of that. So as you can see by the demographics, LA's concentration in those areas are very, very high, and we trigger the additional money. And so now, in other words, students with greatest need get the most resources. It still comes the way it used to, Board Member Martinez, that is, it comes to the district. And the district will have to make its decision about its investment. It doesn't come to school. So what's in front of us, for 3 to 7 years actually, because unless something really changes, and you know what, knock on wood, it won't, it's at least the long-term, even the conservative long-term, show us having growth and improvement in money each year going out. How we invest those resources is going to be a board decision. And it's a board decision which only just last week the regulations were finally given to the state on this issue. So we've done a whole early round of getting input because the entire process has a very clear understanding of parent and community input to come to a board and say, here's what your public is saying. We'd like to hear your decisions about guiding us where to invest. So we've done, thousands on surveys. We've done town hall meetings. We've done community organization meetings. We've done neighborhood meetings. We've done board district meetings. I do student council meetings, student leaders, the student body. And that's to provide us generally the input. Now comes the regulations. And inside the regulations, what we do is have a very formalized structure that helps represent those folks and works with the board and the district. And that committee will be up and running. And now we have a big communications opportunity. So it was strategic for us not to be out in front because the regulations hadn't been formed yet. So literally as we speak, and this is, I guess, the long way to answer your question, we are producing literature and video in multiple languages that help parents understand, so what's the Common Core standards? What is the local control funding formula? What's the accountability plan? And the biggest help we can get is access to your vehicles of communicating this. So you as a city have some interesting vehicles. You have public transportation. You have public communication. We do also around that. And you have councilmanic districts with well-honed communication opportunities. You also have neighborhood council associations with kind of well-honed, this is my observation from the outside. I participate in my own local one once. I don't have a lot of free time, but I did get there once. I participated. And the access to help us with that, because we have ours, but yours is also so very broad. And that would be what we'll look to pair with. So it's low finance, high opportunity. So it's not like the money is the issue, it's the access to all of those channels for which other people know to go to. We have to have a budget by the end of this year, which will represent the first year of investment for next year. We have a very modest increase in the first year, and I'm going to use the word I've never used in public, sizable increases in years 2, 3, and 4. And so it's a lot matters. It'll be the first time, I think you can go back in 6 years, you've had a multi-year budget that you could actually put on paper and say, I can make a commitment for 2 to 3 years around this piece. And parents have told us, and community members in schools, a lot already. They told us what they want. They've told us what they don't want. By and large, what we hear is a very important and healthy debate about who gets to make that decision. So in other words, should a school site make that decision? Just tell me how much I have and give us the parameters. I can't put up a fence with the money. I want to make the decision at my site. I know my students best, parents, teachers, students, staff. Or should a district try to make that decision across that? And I think that's the debate that we're going to enjoy in the next couple of months, and it's a very important one.
Well, I absolutely think that the avenues that you just described in terms of access and what the city can do is something that we need to commit to, not only as a committee, but as a city council. And these are all things we can do, because I think this is historic. There's never been a time in this state's history where the state just says you have almost complete autonomy of how you spend your money and how the money follows the child. So I'm committed to doing that, Superintendent. I want to find avenues and be very serious and deliberate about how we get the word out and have, town hall after town hall of, standing room only, meetings where parents are engaged and truly understand how this works. It impacts our kids so much.
Yep.
And I think it's wonderful. I'm not there anymore. The 4 years I spent there were brutal. Year after year, you had to make really tough decisions,
Yeah.
and it impacted kids and parents and teachers and faculty, and it was horrible. It was absolutely brutal. And so I see a light at the end of the tunnel. So I just, once again, applaud your efforts, and thank you very much for coming. And I do look forward to breaking down our districts, the schools by council district, because I think a lot of my colleagues would be very surprised to see the growth and where we need to work a little harder to make sure that kids are learning.
I have if you have specific questions here, if you just tell me your geography, it's up here. We can absolutely produce it for everybody on all of this data, which is very actually easy to do. And I also want to know if there's something else you want. But you're right. Not only is there a light at the end of the tunnel, we're probably at some of the most important decision-making I think we'll ever make in California.
We'll get you those maps so that you'll see exactly what.
That would be very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. Parks and Ms. Martinez. And thank you, Mr. Daisy. It's a pleasure getting this report from you and seeing the facts as they are. I have a few questions, and that is, first of all, Ms. Martinez, you have an ally in me on this all the way. I just want to let you know that from my first day in office, we have begun formalizing all of our relationships with all of our schools. And I have an education deputy, Star Parsamian, who is doing that, leading the charge in the 13th District. So let us be a resource to you in this effort, please.
Absolutely.
Questions. What is the poverty rate overall, percentage of poverty in LASD students?
So our poverty is measured by those students who participate in free and reduced lunch. And absent preschool is a little over 76%. So more than 3/4 of our youth live in circumstances of poverty. As you know, we have a large homeless rate. This is roofless, not in shelters. All of the data must be taken into context in LAUSD on our best knowledge, best guess of students who are currently not documented, many of whom and their parents don't participate in any kind of returning information for reasons which I might find understandable and completely understandable. So it's likely higher than that.
And that fits in so well with our focus on the City Council. I'm working on affordable housing policy that addresses that, homelessness and homeless families as well. So I look forward to working with you on that as well. And I just want to call out the incredibly encouraging news on teacher communication to parents and the math scores in grades 4 and 8, the instructional days, loss of suspension minimized significantly. What do you attribute that to?
Well, that, I think, was part of what came about when, I know exactly what to attribute it to. It came about through when we put in the performance management system, and we had set a target. I looked at this number. The number itself was, it was higher than I would want it to be. But the story, the profoundly distressing story in that was the disproportionality of young black youth, but particularly young black males, who were being suspended at 9 times the rate of other males of any other identifiable, self-identifiable ethnicity in LAUSD. And when you looked at that, it was like, this is insane. So when we pulled it apart and understood how this was happening through this process, we came upon, at first, numbers bring me comfort. If I can't measure it, I'm not likely to be able to manage it. And what we discovered was, if you took a look at that, you might think, oh my goodness, I mean, kids are out of control, and there must be weapons, and there must be violence, and those are a minuscule fraction of suspensions. It was overwhelmingly this thing called willful defiance. And so we pulled every single suspension slip for 2 years about willful defiance and then tried to understand what was happening. Kids standing on desks, acting completely inappropriate? No. It was items that were very troubling. Failing to bring a book to class. We actually coded all this. Not picking a piece of paper up off the floor. And so what the board did is the board, at the administration's recommendation, made a major adjustment in our discipline policy around willful defiance. You do some things in our schools, and we'll work with you, but you can't come to school here. And we're very clear about that. You sell drugs, you bring a weapon, the things that we all understand are completely problematic. In a year, we cut in half suspensions and triple that for the disproportionality. And then a year later, cut it in half again. It shouldn't be a big shock that African American achievement outpaced all the other achievement, because if you're actually in school, you learn something. And so having a conversation about this notion that we didn't, I'm going to say this because I own this absolutely, we don't have, I didn't come here with a huge dropout problem. I mean, people said there's a big dropout problem in LA. We had a push-out problem. When kids were being pushed out. That has changed dramatically, and it reads in these numbers, and so has the achievement rate.
And I would imagine that the two statistics are tied together.
Absolutely.
The increase in communication,
Yep.
decrease in the
Yep.
kick out of school rate. 2020 Commission. Have you seen the findings of the 2020 Commission? Because they call out the educational systems in Los Angeles as well.
Yeah, I did skim it.
And I'm just curious, and they pretty much nail everyone. And I call it the doom and gloom report, but it's food for thought to think about. And I'd like to get your thoughts at some point on that.
Well, we responded because I was asked to by one of the media outlets. I think if memory serves me correctly, there are 4 statements in the report that deal with education, and then the report ends with the conclusion that it's actually not going to offer any recommendations. So one concern was, if you're going to say X but not do anything about that, I mean, okay, that's what editorial pages are for. I think I understand that. But we tried to hone the facts a little bit tighter around that, the data. We wanted a tighter accuracy around the data, and we provided it. And so for 3 of the 4 points, we responded by offering the actual numbers. Is there room to improve? My Lord, of course there is. And we look forward to that. Large, generalized, sweeping statements of positive or negative, absent accurate, specific facts, was a problem, and we wanted to talk about that. And I, of course, didn't just say that. I took it upon myself to speak to the authors, 2 of the authors, and share that with them as well. And so we want to be part of a solution. I mean, I don't mess around when I say this. LA's America, only sooner. And what happens here is coming to a hometown near you in this country. How we solve our issues, how we actually are successful, and where we struggle. So the report, I don't take lightly. I just want to take it fully.
Right. And we have we're also assessing it for our own good. I just want to of great importance to me, I've always felt that schools are our community centers. I grew up in the public school system, and I've been disheartened in the not so distant past about our public schools not being accessible to the neighborhoods that need them. I'm a huge believer in joint use agreements, in partnering with the nonprofits, community gardens, building skate parks, offering after-school or in-school music programs. I sit on a board that does that in LAUSD public schools. I'm going to continue driving that. It's just one of my top priorities. I am saddened by the lack of artistic, art classes, sports, along with academics. I just know from personal experience of living it how sports and the arts actually enhance the way you think and understand and learn. And so I look forward to working with you and the LAUSD on these issues that are important to the 13th District and important to students across the city. So I thank you very much for this report and your time, and I look very forward to working with you.
Thank you. Two points on that. One is there has been a big shift from the not too distant past in terms of accessibility. So I probably get more flack the other way, which is it's open to the whole world and no one's taking care of it. So we have done a good job on increasing accessibility of facilities. And I think part of that came with when we built the new facilities. So I think we've done a much better job on that piece. On our arts programs, I mean, forget after school, just in school, we have a long way to go to make improvement there. And you are spot on. And we hope to be able to do that. If you weren't here, I would still make the same comment. It was Board Member Martinez, at the time Board Member Martinez, who has led the initiative which has been about the strategic reinvestment in art in LAUSD. Sports, I think we can always do better. I think we saw less general pain there across the system, but it can always improve around that. We welcome opportunities for joint use agreements. I've begun those conversations with Mayor Garcetti, and I think that will be a very positive piece. What's not in here, and of course there's so much you could put in here, but I do want to make the comment that we've opened up more than a dozen full-service medical health clinics right on our school properties, where you can have everything from oral surgery to stitches taken care of. You can take OBGYN care. I mean, it's pretty astonishing, and those have been amazing partnerships. They're a phenomenal model, and our building program allowed us to do that.
And lastly, you just made me think of another question. Are you including obesity rates in children in any of your data?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'd have to find out.
Thank you so much.
Let me just go through a couple things, and I want to thank you also for coming and providing this information. The one thing I was going to ask, when you provide the information by school, there's one thing that we've never figured out is how to deal with the bureaucracy of LA Unified School. We deal with the principals, but if you need to find someone above the principal, it's not a pleasant task. And so if it's ability on that form that shows by school or by district, if we can see who the people are that are at principal level and above, I think it'd be very helpful, because we've just kind of given up. We just talked to the principal, and we've had some transition of, I guess, assistant superintendents, and so you don't quite know who's in place at any given time or what the phone number is. So that would be very helpful to understand.
The front page, we'll be thrilled to provide you the name of all five. So Robert Bravo, who handles fundamentally the schools in the South. And we'll talk about Cheryl Hildreth, who handles fundamentally the schools in the West. And Roberto Martinez, who handles the schools in the East. We are choosing a superintendent in the North, but at the moment it's Byron Maltese. And then the district is cut North, South, East, and West. And then schools that are brand new, innovative, teacher-led schools, and schools that historically have struggled form what's called a fifth district, which is intensive support and intervention, and Tommy Chang runs that. And we'll give you their numbers. Absolutely be glad to do that. No question whatsoever. It's a great question, and there has been a lot of transition.
The one thing, just to go through some questions that we get asked that we don't have the answers to, is that, before I go to that, I just want to comment that it's kind of interesting on your chart for the performance meter, that the students' attendance correlates to the instructors' attendance. They kind of go up at the same time, and which I guess is part of that whole leadership. If the teacher's there and you're not going to be dealing with substitutes, the children will most likely attend.
It's a great
willingly.
observation.
Yeah. So that was one thing that stuck out in my mind. The other thing is that in dealing with, and some of these questions just asking for the status, we heard so much information that adult schools no longer existed, but then I see on your chart you got a couple 100,000 people in adult schools. So how has that changed? Because we used to pay a lot of attention to adult schools and go into the graduations, and we saw so many young people get their second or third opportunity, that they were going into nursing and a variety of things that were not available had they not had that opportunity. So is there a functional adult school at this time, or has it just been cut back, or just what is the status?
Well, we have 256,000 people enrolled and going to adult education, but I think, and we have 37 campuses across the entirety of LAUSD, but I think it would be absolutely true that we've had to make cuts there like every other place. And so programmatic cuts have taken place. And I'm not going to try to defend the cuts, but if you're at the end of the day and you have to reduce an opportunity for mature citizens for art, and you can't run a K classroom, those very painful decisions were made. And so there certainly were reductions around that. We're also in the process now of the 5 consortia have been announced about what would adult education look like in California. We got one of them. So ourselves, the city of Los Angeles, any school district that's in our area, and the community colleges are putting together a proposal about what it would look like going forward.
And then the one thing that is a constant debate in my community is this back and forth regarding charter schools versus, quote, regular schools. And there is so much discussion, and we've tried to figure it out and realize there's so much misinformation that there's a perception in charter schools that kids are all hand-selected and bussed in, and that's why their scores are better. And then you hear discussion as to, well, charter schools never take the special needs kids. That's why their score, I mean, and yet we've not been able to get our arms around exactly what this debate is, but people are so entrenched in both camps that there's very little meaningful discussion that can go on, and often we don't have the ammunition to diffuse what either point of view is.
There's probably more data in LAUSD on that topic than maybe any other topic, and so I feel badly we don't share it publicly enough. There isn't, I don't think, a question you could ask that we can't respond to. So let me do a subset of the next report and just do a scan of charters. We can tell you, well, we know everybody who's in them. We can also, which we do also, is enrollment, a demographic by neighborhood enrollment demographic, achievement rates. They all have to take the same tests. They do things differently, but they have to take the same assessment at the end of the day. I apologize for my ignorance. Could you just give me a sense of your district? So I don't geography?
Basically, geography is south of the Santa Monica Freeway. Our northern boundary is generally Vernon Avenue. We go as far south as about 108th and Broadway. The west side of the district is generally Crenshaw, and then going east, we're just on the other side of the Harbor Freeway. And we just touched the very southeast end, we touched the border of Watts. Our major high schools are Locke, Crenshaw, Fauché, and then the feeder schools that go to those schools.
So you have a healthy number of charter schools?
Yes.
In your
Yeah, we
area?
do.
Yeah,
And
okay. I got the geography in my head.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, Fauché just rocked at the parade. All the youth were on
The thing
float.
is that what's been impressive about Fauché, and I may be wrong on the numbers, 10 years ago, they were viewed as a poor-performing school.
Huh.
And then, I think 2 or 3 years ago, they were viewed as one of the top 50 schools
Yeah.
in America. And then they won, I believe, an international competition in robotics.
Yeah.
So they have all that going on a concrete campus with little grass.
Yep.
And yet they're performing, but it may, the complete turnaround over the last 10
So
years.
is Dorsey in yours?
No, Dorsey's in the 10th district.
Okay.
It's further, it's west and north.
Okay, so we can provide that by each district, and we can do, because we'll know the charters and do this piece, but I would have to say that when all else is done, and I'm going to be very transparent, I am a person who philosophically supports high-performing charters. I think they're public schools. I don't think they are public schools, and I think and believe that parents have the right of choice around that. So I do that within the framework of how I do my job, but so I want you to understand the predisposition. I don't support low-performing charters. I think we close them. We have oversight, and you open and have parents have access to high-performing public charters. I'm not a person who supports vouchers. I support public charters.
Speaking of that, one of the things that it appears in the conversation is that when people separate the distinctions, it's almost as though they don't view charters as public schools.
Yeah.
It's almost like that's a group of private schools that happen to be under the jurisdiction of LA Unified. Then there's the public schools, the real schools, that's where we got to put our energy in. And so there's that kind of debate
Yes.
that goes on.
And we would want to help say they're all real schools because they're all real youth who go to them, as you know. But I think if one were to take at least a healthy strand of the debate when everything is boiled down to is that students who exercise the choice to go there, that enrollment number leaves LA and the resources for that child leave LA and go to the charter school. And jobs hang in the balance around that. And I think that's at some ways many parts of the crux of the difficult conversation to have. And we'd be thrilled to provide you the information.
Then the other one, these come from our community, and we pull a couple of articles to kind of remind ourselves. But there was a debate a while back on the transfer or transition of special ed students. And I know years ago the special needs kids were in off campus, then they brought them on campus.
Yes.
Now it seems like the debate is bringing them back on campus. And
Absolutely.
now where are we on that?
So we are, as a reminder, in many, many years into a consent decree, a court case, which had long before my time called the Smith consent decree. And one of the obligations of the plaintiffs that we oversee by a judge is to provide students wherever and as maximum possibility to be mainstreamed and not actually be in a special place off campus if that can be provided on their campus. Some students, we provide the best services, very specialized in off campuses, multiply involved, multiply medical fragile, you understand. Others, we have worked very hard at trying to bring them on to the campus. It is not actually a choice. It's the law, and that we're trying to implement and do a good job with this. We've come to the point where we've been in the consent decree for years and years, and in the last 3 years, we've almost been able to exit it. I think we are a year away from exiting because of the progress we've been making. It's a subject that's fraught with lots of concern. You meet parents and guardians who are very afraid and nervous that the same relationship and quality of service won't take place on a comprehensive campus. But to date, overall, I think we've done a very good job at those transitions. But when you first hear about it, people get very nervous, and I understand that. I think one of the best ways is if you and I have the opportunity just to visit what it looks like, and then you can see, I think the quality of it could speak for itself.
Well, my sister is a special ed teacher at university, and I've been on her campus, and it thrives on the fact that it's on campus and the kids go to all the programs.
You mean Uni High?
Yes.
Oh, I was an excellent example of a program that has worked very well.
And in fact, she's the one that keeps me abreast of some of the debate. The other one I was going to ask you about, and this comes up periodically, is the whole issue of where is the district in the sense of dealing with teachers that violate the law. And we had an instance in our district where a teacher actually violated the law and had a relationship with a student, and the school district shuffled them to lock as opposed to getting the police involved. And this comes up because these stories come up fairly routine about teacher did this, teacher did that. What is the safeguards that are going on today that we didn't have 3 to 5 years ago?
So there is no tolerance, period. End of story, no discussion. If you do something that harms a child, you're not going to be employed in LAUSD. And we're not going to move you, and we're going to remove you from the classroom for your own safety and that of the school and that of the student while we investigate that. And if that investigation proves that that person should not have the right to be in front of a student, we're going to recommend to the board that they initiate the firing process and remove that person. And if it turns out to be something that is absolutely not true whatsoever, we look forward to helping see that teacher continue, or that staff member continue, or that administrator continue right away. There is no question that in the last 3 years I've dealt with a number of issues where history provided me with an opportunity to make some corrections. The way that LAUSD operates is without question that those behaviors are just simply not allowed and not tolerated.
And then maybe clarify one other issue that came up a while back on, and it seemed to me to be logical, but it just seemed to be a backlash as it relates to changing the curriculum to cause students to be more analytical in their thinking. I didn't quite understand the debate, so I thought you could tell us what that was all about.
It's a huge debate right now in the country, gigantic. So most states, including California, adopted a new set of standards called the Common Core State Standards. This could be a presentation unto itself. I'm going to do this in like one sentence, but realize it could be a long presentation. Basically, states had 50 different curricula. So algebra in Maine, Minnesota, and Michigan look differently. Now, which begins next year, we've been preparing for this for 2 years, 3 years actually. Algebra is algebra wherever you are in the country, and its level of rigor at every grade level is substantially higher. This is, I think, a very, very good thing, and one that's going to lead a lot of resources to help teachers and students and parents become comfortable in navigating through the new courses and realizing that it's going to be much more rigorous in terms of doing that. So the standards are internationally benchmarked so that we remain competitive at a global level, and that they're designed so that you don't really have algebra in name only, and then you have a much more rigorous form of algebra. Algebra is algebra. And the shift, if you were to try to take 2 examples, one from English and one from math, that you would most likely see. So in English language arts, one of the greatest shifts is the focus for students to deeply read complex text and write to questions that require evidence in your answer. So one example shift is a big move towards nonfiction text as infused in the curriculum. Good example is we've all, even myself, have been preparing and then going out and doing demonstration lessons. I just went to Crenshaw recently, taught a class in the Common Core, and mine was a class in U.S. history, and the 2 source documents I used was the Constitution of the United States in its form and King's letter from Birmingham jail. And so what the class prompt was over the entire period was like, how does the oppressed exercise power against the oppressor from first source documents, not novels, not movie, not story. But yes, those are important in there too, but first source documents. And a first source document, those are excellent examples of a first source document. And then how do you give your answer referring to the text itself? So like, I think, sentences that all begin with, in my opinion, I mean, those are important, but actually, if you can demonstrate why, for example, King chose so many references that his reader at the point, which were the clergy, would have resonated with. Why were similar references placed inside of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence? Another example is why in the framers who wrote the Declaration did they have to list all the grievances against the king in a very similar way that King lists all the grievances as to why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing in Birmingham. Big shift. It doesn't mean that like Romeo and Juliet's gone, and it doesn't mean that, the Invisible Man is gone. What it means is that only those as text have definitely shifted to some nonfiction. In mathematics, one would say that one of the greatest changes is that algebra is no longer discretely taught unto itself in what we used to call algebra. There's algebraic thinking, which begins in 3rd grade and goes to 12th. And that has a much different trajectory across courses than it did before.
That would be from 3rd to graduation, but it would intermingle in a variety of subjects other than just the subject of algebra.
Exactly.
Then maybe you can enlighten us on the iPad controversy. One thing I thought was interesting.
I don't know what the controversy is.
What's that?
I don't know what the controversy is.
Well, you know what I thought was interesting? I read an article several years ago that Texas, I understand, is the home of school book industry publications. Yet several of their school districts started a couple of years ago giving their students computers at the 1st grade, and they will never own a book. And they will take them through. Then to see 5 years later this proposal and to see the back and forth on it, it just seemed like, I don't know if it was political or whether people just didn't want to see it happen. They started talking about cheaper costs and lost sight of what the utility of that technology was. I'm just thought maybe give us an update on that.
So I think there's a good, healthy dose of political manipulation. I think there's a nice, healthy dose of using anything to basically say we don't want to do X, but we don't really know what Y is. I mean, I get that. That's, we wouldn't be in the jobs we were in if we don't deal with that on a regular basis. I also think that people are trying to come to terms with the fact that students now access so much content digitally. That is a big shift. Is it the right device at the end of the day? I think the right device will always be 1 year away around this piece. So you do what you do for students. Fundamentally, this initiative was designed to do 3 things. One is end a very pernicious digital divide that takes place between youth who live in circumstances of poverty and youth who live in circumstances of privilege. And so all students get the right to have that. Second is to be able to provide students and their teachers and staff with digital content. Why digital content? Digital content is alive and printed content is static. So the day the book is printed, there is no more editions. I can assure you there is not a history book in LAUSD that has a well-designed chapter on the Arab Spring. They just haven't been printed since then. Yet you can teach the entire trajectory of the Arab Spring from Tunisia to today by using first source documents which are available as curriculum is constantly updated. And then thirdly, there are no more paper and pencil tests in California starting this year. So all this data that you just saw, that we went over, they come from when students sit down and take their tests in the spring. That's gone. All tests will be taken on a device and they're computer adaptive. So you log on, you take your state assessment. 2 big things have changed about that. One is they're untimed. Student can take as long as they need to complete the assessment. And the assessment isn't 50 questions anymore. So as you answer a question, the program will ask you a more difficult one or a less difficult one. So in the old world, you used to be able to say a student was proficient in 6th grade math. What you can learn now is that a student is, yes, proficient in 6th grade math, but is also proficient in 7th grade math. And you can also say a student is not proficient in 6th, but actually proficient in 5th. And allows you that kind of information. And those three things, one, we absolutely had to resolve, and two, we've chosen to. So the initiative has certainly changed as you think about, should we think about laptops at high schools versus tablets. That's good growth. That's why you want a good, robust policy discussion. We should have brought teachers with it. I mean, anybody who can read a bond notice realizes that you can't. The money was designed for technology. We had the choice of either building new standalone labs, which is somewhat obsolete, or mobile devices, which is where we chose to go. But I can't, and no one else can, assert that the money could be used for anything other than that. Now, as to why it's controversial, well, I don't know. I think it's always a good thing to help youth in poverty.
Where is the district, because it's going back and forth from the state legislation and on rating teachers and performance, and whether students' achievement scores should be part of that rating. What did that all settle out? Where are we on that?
Well, let's see. How do I even begin that? It's never settled. There's a rather high-profile court case which begins in this city in a week called Vergara, which is affecting a number of districts, including LA. Plaintiffs have sued on some issues. LA, USD, and UTLA negotiated a new evaluation system because of a lawsuit that was triggered, which we weren't following the Stull Act as it was amended. We are in the middle of disagreements on the finer points of it. I have every faith that we will eventually work closely with UTLA to do both the best thing and follow the law. But it's an understandable hot issue. So I think I would say that our system of evaluating teachers and principals, in my opinion, is absolutely best in class. And we are experiencing the understandable stress in implementing it. But we're doing it anyways because it's the law. And we chose not to be where a lot of states went to and said, okay, so 50% or 60% of evaluation has to be this one test. We actually did something very different, and I think unique and quite educationally sound. And we said that a significant portion of a final evaluation will be both status and growth, how well students did over time with you, and also how well they did on a single test with you. So if a student came in reading at a 3rd grade level and you're a 6th grade teacher, and that student leaves at the end of the 6th grade reading on a 5th grade level, they've made 2 years of progress, even though they actually are not reading at a 6th grade level. The student reading at a 6th grade level comes in and leaves reading at a 6th grade level, did exactly what they were supposed to do in a year. One could make the case that that first teacher did so much more with that student and needs to be given credit for that. And then the second thing is that individual and collective. So how your whole school does is how I do too. And we capped that portion of any evaluation at no more than 30%. And we think that that's wise. And so given the fact that, we have our regular PERB hearings and our regular conflicts, everything I say and do here will be used against me in one of those hearings. So I'm going to end my comments about that portion until we get through the right channel.
I had a quick follow-up question, Superintendent, and I think you alluded to this earlier. So on the employee misconduct issue,
Yes.
I know we were not successful in passing SB 1530. But as I understand, there is a group of folks in the state that are trying to get this qualified as an initiative. I'm not sure if it's in the November ballot. Maybe do you know where that's at all? Have they qualified?
I don't know specifically.
This is a bill to
I think I had
fill.
heard that it had qualified.
It has qualified?
I had heard that. I
Did the
don't,
district were you
We can-
taking a position on that?
we can find out. I don't think the district has taken a position yet because it hasn't been put on the ballot.
So there was an attempt through state legislation to make it easier or give the power to local school districts to dismiss folks who
I think what council,
basically employee misconduct because
Yeah.
of all the molestation cases that were coming up. We weren't successful
What-
in the state legislature, so I
Yeah.
know there are people behind an initiative statewide to put this on the ballot.
I mean, Councilwoman Martinez is referring to the fact that I swear most Californians don't realize board members do not have the authority to fire
Correct.
a teacher. It happens in an entirely different venue. They can only say, yes, go to that venue. The dismissal of teachers takes place in the Office of Administrative Hearings by a tribunal of teachers and an administrative law judge, and they make the decision. And if they make the decision to say reinstate, that person comes back to the district regardless of what the board thinks. See, boards can hire, but they can't fire in certificated staff in California.
Is that administrative process a part of the district, or is it independent of the district?
It's completely independent of the district.
That's what's so difficult.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult.
And that a lot of that was attempted to be changed in legislation, at least 2 attempts that took place, both of them failed. And I know you're right that a large body has crafted an initiative for ballot, and I think we're in the process of getting it qualified.
So, but we don't know if it's qualified or not.
I don't know.
Yeah, they filed it with the state. They still need to go through the signature phase. Their aim is November.
Okay.
Well, I hope the district.
But it
takes a
hasn't come out of the
decision.
AG's office yet,
No.
for title and summary or anything?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I know the school board took a position to support SB 1530, so I hope that they're on the same track to support this initiative once it qualifies. We have a lot of work to do in California, folks, on this very issue. That's it. I just had a follow-up.
I'm good, thank you. I want to thank you for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you,
What
sir.
we'd like to do, we're going to have the staff get you the maps of our 15 council
That would
districts.
be helpful.
And then the other thing is that we'd like to have staff get with you and coordinate a timing to come to council so
Okay.
that you can give a similar presentation and then present the state of the schools by district.
By council mandate,
By council
absolutely.
district, and some of the other charter stuff that you mentioned. And so what I'd like to do, if we can ensure that we can get in February a date for this meeting, we spent almost 2 hours here, so we can ask the council to block off a period, a like period, so that we're not rushing the superintendent, and we can work his calendar to where he has that time available.
Great, we'll look forward to working together on that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Can we do that?
Appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Chair, just for the record, the committee is adopting the motion as amended to change the date on the motion from January to sometime in
February.
February.
Yes. So we'll adopt that unanimously, and thank everyone, and thank you, Superintendent. And we have no other cards, and so the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, sir. Very informative. Thank you.